Hey there, this is Brom Bresenham. I did a lot of UI work this past week. I've been in the weeds, so I don't have much to show for it, but I do have some things to tell. Last week I had started working on Axor's user interface and got sidetracked trying to make text that correctly scaled with a dynamic layout. This week I continued working towards a dynamic UI and got bogged down with other issues related to scaling and maintaining aspect ratios in a dynamic layout. I developed a number of custom UI classes, or nodes, hoping to meet my needs. They basically work, but they're kludgy, quirky, and they feel brittle. After a week of hacking around with the UI library, I'm reluctantly concluding that Godot's built-in UI components, and specifically its layout capabilities, are not well suited for implementing Axor's UI. Here's an overview of the situation. Godot's base UI component is called control. Controls are placed using classic pixel position and size, with the option to further modify the placement using proportional anchors with pixel offset margins. There's a subclass of control called container. Containers are responsible for laying out their child nodes according to one strategy or another, HBox container, VBox container, and so on. Containers adjust the pixel bounds of their child nodes. Anchors and offsets are disregarded for container child nodes. They only use size and position. HBox and VBox are heavy lifters in the layout world in general. Most layouts can be broken down into nested sets of controls laid out horizontally or vertically. In Godot, for a control to show up in a VBox, say, it must either have a minimum pixel height defined, or it must have its expand flag set. If neither of these is true, the control occupies 0 pixels of height. So by adjusting the minimum size of a control, we can adjust how much space it takes up. The expand flag isn't helpful if we're wanting a particular size because it just takes up all the remaining space. Or two components, both set to expand, will each take up half the space, and so on. Note that a VBox will set its own vertical minimum size to be the sum of minimum heights of its child components so that it can nest properly in other containers. What I want for my game is for select controls and containers to maintain certain aspect ratios as the layout is dynamically adjusted to fit different window sizes. And that's very difficult in Godot. The fundamental issue is that there are chicken and egg problems with control and container sizing and the order of operations during layout. Say that the UI consists of a VBox with two children, a game view that we want to keep at a square aspect ratio, and a footer that we want to expand to fill up any remaining space. In the game view script, we tap into the parent container's resized signal and set our custom minimum size to be a square the size of the width or the height of the container, whichever is smallest. Let's say it ends up being 800 by 800 pixels. The problem is that the VBox then sets its own minimum size to be at least 800 by 800 pixels. No matter how small the window then becomes, the VBox stays at 800 by 800 pixels, and so the game view also stays at 800 by 800 pixels, even if not all of it is visible. I made a number of custom Godot nodes to work around this issue, intending to package them up as a plugin. But, like I said, they mostly work, but they feel kludgy and brittle. Ultimately, Godot's built-in UI system is good for two different types of UI. A fixed layout UI that is scaled and centered for different aspect ratios, or a dynamic layout with fixed size controls, such as the Godot editor itself. As you resize the window, panels expand and contract, but the icons and text elements stay the same size. What Godot's built-in UI is not good for is a dynamic layout with dynamically sizing and aspect-constrained controls. From here, I see two different ways forward. The first approach would be for me to make a top-level script that responds to display size changes, performs size and aspect computations, and manually sets and resets the minimum sizes of various components so that layout happens correctly. Or, the second approach is I could write a full-fledged UI layout library that piggybacks on top of the existing library and provides the layout capabilities I need. With my predilection for tool building and all the experience and insight I've gained with and into Godot's UI system over the last 2 weeks, choosing number 2 is a no-brainer. After all, a Godot control is essentially a bounding rectangle with a position and a size that needs adjustment and placement. I'll be able to craft these new UI components so that they can be worked with in the editor, just like the existing components. And finally, I'll be providing an alternative to the container layout system, but I'll be able to use all the other controls as is: buttons, labels, and so on. I'll mention a few other odds and ends. I believe I've now found the widest and narrowest portrait mode device aspect ratios that I'll use to test Axor on. The widest is easy. iPad with a 3:4 ratio, or 0.75. Original iPhone is 2:3, or 0.67. The common cinematic display ratio of 16:9, or 9:16 in portrait mode, is 0.5625. Current iPhone 14 Pro is 131:284, or 0.46. The narrowest devices I've found are 9:21, or 0.43. A landscape mode 21:9 screen is an ultra-wide ratio originating in the movie industry. I wanted to pick a good 9:21 screen size for testing that was not too big and not too small. I wrote a simple rogue program to print out all the possibilities up to a width of 450 pixels. 333 by 777 jumped out at me as being easy to remember, and a good size as well. My initial research into constraining the size of various controls led me to a Godot plugin called MaxSizeContainer on the GitHub account MattUV. It was written for Godot 3.x and hadn't been updated in over a year. 8 months ago, someone rewrote it for the Godot 4 pre-release. I tried it, but it wasn't quite working on Godot 4. I forked the repo, touched it up for Godot 4, added some additional features, and republished it. It seemed like a piece of the puzzle, but I needed additional custom nodes. I made a series of custom nodes along similar lines, and I packaged them up along with MaxSizeContainer into a new Godot plugin library called UI Aspect Toolkit. Of course, I eventually realized that I just couldn't accomplish what I wanted by hacking the existing system. I needed a new system. Final item. I put together a series of console commands that may be of interest to anyone who screen records their Macintosh. When I record a demo video off my Mac, I do 3 things. First, I set the display resolution from 2560 by 1440 down to 1920 by 1080. Second, I turn on focus mode, aka do not disturb mode, to prevent pop-up notifications. Third, I set my system clock to analog mode in order to hide the date and to obfuscate the time so that the dates and times aren't jumping wildly from one clip to the next. Weary of manually doing and undoing those three things, I researched ways to automate them. Now I simply run a script file to switch into or out of demo mode. To change the display resolution, I installed this utility called Display Mode. From GitHub, user account Puya with P00YA as the spelling, /display mode. I run display mode T 1920 1080 and similar to change resolution. To toggle focus mode on or off, I followed an approach I found on Apple Stack Exchange. First, I went to System Settings, Keyboard, Shortcuts, Mission Control, and defined the shortcut for Turn Do Not Disturb On Off to be Control-Alt-Shift-Command-D. Then I put the following Apple script file in my Dropbox. Tell application system events to keystroke D using open curly, command down, shift down, option down, control down, comma separated, close curly. Finally, I run the Apple script to toggle focus mode. OSA script and my file path. As an addendum, the following command prints 1 if focus mode is on, or 0 if not. Defaults read com.apple.controlcenter, quotes, ns status item, visible, focus modes, end quotes. To put the clock in analog mode and to restore it later, defaults write com.apple.menuextra.clock.plist is analog, -bool, true, or false. Alright, that's a wrap on week 3. I'll be back next week. See you then.